other books. Okay. So Mill's methods. Let's not forget Mill's methods. And we could go back to my notes. Really, John Stuart Mill, 1806, 1873. He's following Jeremy Bentham. In fact, they were friends. Jeremy Bentham was a friend of James Mill, the father, right? And so he was very much aware of them. And by the way, if you're familiar with Russell, the British philosopher Bertrand Russell, who I should also mention, let me do that. That's not what he looked like when he was younger either. When he was born, his family asked John Stuart Mill if John Stuart Mill would be the godfather for Bertrand Russell. So you get this impression that all of these significant British folks are at least friends, interrelated in some way. So that's one tagging off to the next, basically. So he follows Jeremy Bentham and leads on to Bertrand Russell. So there's that interesting. And we've got, under the utilitarian system, you've got the hedonistic calculus, I mentioned that. Governmental reforms to help the poor. Let me take a squirrel here and point out that what?
Hi everyone, Mark Barbie here. That's Andy.
What?
December 14th, 2012.
So here, this is from Oliver Twist, although this is the musical, so this is Oliver.
Well, he's like 8 years old. He does not need to be worrying about that.
He's an orphan that's being mistreated constantly. And so he's concerned about the kind of love of parents for him.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
You're blushing.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so nobody's happy with this music. I'll quit. But that's Oliver Twist, and that's written by somebody help me. Who wrote Christmas, the Christmas Story? Charles? No.
Not that one. It's not
The Christmas. Dickens. Charles Dickens. Thank you. Okay, so Charles Dickens, most of his literature, The Christmas Story, Scrooge. Scrooge is a nasty old miser, right? Right? Scrooge, miser. Treating his employees like horror, right? But, of course, famously, the ghosts of Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future all arrive and convince Scrooge, Ebenezer, to convert and suddenly become, buy that turkey and take it down to the Cratchits, etc., or the goose. Actually, it was a goose, right? What's the point of this? These rich people that are making all this money and eking everything out of their workers are horrid people, and they need to reform or they're going to go to hell, basically, with the chains. Ebenezer, all that, scaring people to death. But Oliver Twist is about this young man who ends up being orphaned. His mother gives birth to him in an orphanage or whatever, and so the relatives don't know about the boy, and they only find out about him later. And when they get him, he's so clearly elite, despite the fact that he's an orphan in an orphanage. And so, his parents find him not his parents, but his relatives find him, and he's kind of rescued, because he's obviously not the same as the rabble. If you think of Harry Potter, as a plot device, he's magical, right? And so, his name is down, going to Hogwarts, from before he was born, and of course, he ends up going there because he's meant to go there because of elitism, etc. Well, you've got a British society that's loaded with this, and there are authors, not only John Stuart Mill, but also Charles Dickens, who was a contemporary of him, writing all of these books that basically are depicting those industrialists that are making all of this wealth using practically slave labor in order to make their wealth more and more and more. And John Stuart Mill, as a liberal, is concerned about getting control over these industrialists and making sure that somehow they help improve the lives of the people. And Charles Dickens is another one, as an author that's writing novels that's trying to do the same thing. So they're part of that movement in England, as well as women's liberation and things of that sort. So government reforms to help the poor. In 1823, Mill followed his father into the employ of the British East India Company, which he served until 1858. He had his mental crisis in his 20s. Meets Harriet Taylor. Has one term in Parliament and was disappointed in how difficult it was and how little he was able to accomplish. But he writes books, System of Logic, which gives us Mill's methods, which I'll skip down to here. Notice that in inductive reasoning, basic methods such as the method of agreement. So when you have something that occurs naturally, let's go and do it this way. Well, you could actually go to each of them. Let's try this one. Oh, well, of course, Wikipedia has. So these are ways of trying to figure out how to improve your reasoning process using inductive methods. They're primarily improvements psychologically, but they actually also work. So they make us feel like they work psychologically, but they actually do work, even though it's primarily a guess. You're still guessing. But the thing is that these guesses tend to be good guesses. That makes sense. So how do you make good guesses? Agreement, method of difference. What's different in this case? And you can figure out what's perhaps the cause of something because of the difference, right? The method of both agreement and difference. Method of residues. Concomitant variations, I love that. And that's the idea of, you have more and more of this, and less, as it goes up, and you get more of that, and then it goes up and down. And guess what? As that happens, we get more of and it goes down, and it goes up. And, hey, it looks like concomitant variations. Like, we can't say that this is the cause of this, but boy, The more of this you have, the more of this you have. You know, a famous one is look at how many McDonald's there are and compare that to the population. And you'll discover that the more the number of McDonald's went up, the greater the population of the world went up. Now, we can't blame that on McDonald's, but you get an interesting concomitant variation, you know, that is kind of amazing.
Isn't that correlation?
That is. You know, concomitant.
So it's just another word for it?
Well, he's the one that invents it. See, that's the thing. You think, wow, we've got all these inductive methods that we've been using since we were like Aristotelians. But no, they didn't invent those ideas and refine that until Mill gives us these refined inductive methods.
This kind of just sounds like math. Like, it kind of just sounds like he's like, hey, let's copy everything math did, but put it in words that are easier-ish to understand.
There is a author named Stephen Wolfram. Are you familiar with him? He's one of those.
Oh, is it like Wolfram that Wolfram?
Yes, it is. In fact, yes. He's the one that gives you. The first thing I became familiar with many years ago was on floppies, that you could add Mathematica to your computer. Yes? You familiar with Mathematica? Or you're just yawning? That was
yawning,
it.
sorry.
Okay. So I thought perhaps you were just so absolutely amazed that he was the one that. So.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on your computer and you could like have mathematical formulas. You know, I mean, this was back when you had the little blinking white square, you know, and you could like type the, etc. And all of a sudden you could start doing mathematical formulas on your computer and like get answers and stuff. He's recently written about how ChatGPT works, and it was absolutely fascinating. And he's got new books out. And by the way, what's really neat, the first one I think that was most significant was The New Kind of Science. Did you hear? That's actually fairly old now, The New Kind of Science. And that's where you start using computers to help do science, by keeping track of things. And one of the things it's like pages after pages of computer runs showing that what people thought were chaos meant, chaos, nothing, no order. But if you take chaos and use a computer to expand on that chaotic series of events, what you discover is at a larger and larger database, you discover that chaos has patterns that you could use the computer to describe. And in that book, Wolfram concludes that actually, if you could write an algorithm in a computer to mimic the events of a natural system to the point where you could predict what that natural system is doing, the natural system is actually that algorithm that you've written in the computer. In other words, we could mimic nature with computer algorithms. And the book is an awful lot of computer runs showing you how the patterns all work out and how you can trace the patterns and so on. And he's still, metamathematics is, I think, the newest one. And this one basically argues that physics and mathematics are really the same thing when you get down to the bottom of it. So that's pretty cool. You do have to like math to read this stuff, though. So that's, it's unforgiving that way. But that's okay if you like math. And that's pretty impressive. And you could notice you could read this online. You do not have to buy it. And in fact, I've discovered a way that you don't have to buy it even if you want the book. You just like him. And the secretary will email you and say, would you like a copy of the book? And you say yes. And she sends them to you, which is, how that works.
Most of his money off software. He has one of the most advanced math solvers out there. A lot of Photomath and Chegg and all that stuff is based on Wolfram Alpha, which is his software.
So he's important. And I mean, I guess the clearest example of Mill's methods today, if you apply those, and so on.